When we talk about the drug war in America, and basically in every country that's a member state to the United Nations, you often wonder, like why do we have the drug war? Can't the federal government just, change a couple things, get rid of the Controlled Substance Act, and treat substances a little bit more scientifically instead of using fear-based propaganda to scare people into doing the drugs they want them to do? And all these other things that we're complaining about is basically because the drug war has many different puppet masters and all this stuff, and you really can't really get to the bottom of it. But we know that the drug war comes from somewhere higher up. It comes from the United Nations, all right? And if you look at America, we don't really follow too many treaties with the United Nations, because we're not into it, I guess. I don't know. I remember we didn't like the resolutions that told us not to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. We went ahead and did that anyway. They've put resolutions out trying to curtail the drone bombing that we have been doing like nonstop for almost who knows how long, since drones were invented. I don't know. Anyway, so what you do is you look at the United Nations Drug Control Conventions. That's where this whole thing started. And it was, of course, alcohol prohibition had its day, and legalizing, making marijuana illegal began before all this. But, this sort of thing was starting to happen even in the 1800s, like the late 1800s, when temperance movements started against alcohol. So anyway, you got this thing called the United Nations Drug Control Conventions. What are they, you ask? There are three United Nations treaties that together form the international law framework of the global drug control regime, or regimen, whatever you want to call it. Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1961, as amended by the 1972 Protocol. The Convention on Psychotropic Substances in 1971. And the Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances, 1988. The purpose of these treaties is to establish internationally applicable control measures with the aim of ensuring that psychoactive substances are available for medical and scientific purposes while preventing them from being diverted into illegal channels. The treaties also include general provisions on the trafficking and use of psychoactive substances. The 1961 and 71 conventions classify controlled substances in 4 lists or schedules according to their perceived therapeutic value and potential risks of abuse. Now, the thing in 1988 also basically provided tables listing precursor chemicals, reagents, and solvents which are frequently used in the illicit manufacture of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Mouthful. The treaty also significantly reinforced the obligation of countries to establish criminal offenses in order to combat all aspects of the illicit production, possession, and trafficking of psychoactive substances. So, like I said, the history basically, they want to say it started in China with the opium problem there, and whatever. What it really started as is as the pharmaceutical industries started to gain a really good foothold in the world marketplace, they decided to take over the way of thinking towards medicine at the United Nations. It's not a big surprise. It's not a big evolutionary jump. There isn't like a whole lot of missing pieces to the puzzle. It's clear as day that this whole United Nations Drug Control Convention was put together by Big Pharma and all the, health agents and, quite frankly, the lobbyist doctors that were working with Big Pharma to demonize cannabis and other natural drugs, or more widely available things. And by this time, psychedelics wasn't that big, but even in the 1988 one, there was really never focused on psychedelics, but somehow psychedelics gets bunched up on the most, like in America, on the Controlled Substances Act. Here it would be the Schedule 1, which is supposed to be reserved for only the most highly dangerous and addictive substances that don't have medical value. And we don't there's like really no justification for that, because we know that like LSD and magic mushrooms are really not that addictive, quite frankly. You'd have to be really like, I don't know what kind of person would be addicted to LSD, or it doesn't create addiction as in like if you do cocaine and then the buzz wears off a little bit and you want to do more. That's like what you call like on the spot addictive properties that immediately you feel like you want more. Not a lot of drugs do that. And definitely psychedelics definitely don't do that. They're the kind of thing where you do it and you kind of don't want to do it for a while afterwards. So what's the logic behind having marijuana, which is totally harmless and it's actually everything about it is medicinal? What's the logic behind having marijuana on there as Schedule 1? And why is it considered a psychedelic? What do we know about it? What did they know about it that made them decide to classify cannabis as a psychedelic? Just because the molecular structure? I mean, that would be a good argument. The tetrahydra, that would be a very good argument. So my question, the answer to my question can really be found in what psychedelics do. And quite frankly, they make you think. They open your mind up. They're not like all the other substances that just basically give you muscle relaxation or whatever euphoria that surrounds muscular and nerve function. Whereas psychedelic does those things too, but also makes your brain kind of like is part of the buzz. It's not, your brain is activated. So when people say that smoking marijuana makes you dumb or whatever, that couldn't make any less sense than, any of the other stupid propaganda they use for marijuana or any other drug for that matter. The idea that psychedelic drugs are dangerous and addictive and not medicinal has no basis in science whatsoever. Those are all just fear tactics. Like they're trying to sell their conclusion through fear. And the only way they can do that with a setup like the United Nations Drug Control Convention is to basically say that it's addictive, no medical value, and all this shit. And just based on, maybe back then they didn't have any scientific data to go on at all. It was just completely like they seen marijuana, and the marijuana of the day, quite frankly, probably didn't look all that medicinal. Even if you found the best stuff available, it was probably still far cry from what you'd see today. But at the same time, what would make them make that assessment? Who knows? But like I said, it probably has a lot more to do with the fact that when you smoke marijuana, it fucking wakes you the fuck up. You start to think more about the condition of the world you're living in. You start to think about, wait, how come this world is the way it is when I got here? I can't basically do anything to change it, and I'm stuck adhering to the weird, traditions and ways that people operate. Yeah, marijuana does all that. That's why religion and marijuana don't get along too good. It's also why the governments all over the world already hated marijuana. They didn't need the United Nations to come along and be like, hey, when people smoke this, they start to figure out that you guys are full of shit over here in the government. Yeah. So that's probably a lot more to do with the Schedule 1 designation. And the United Nations is pretty stern about them. They're not, the reason that the rescheduling is more of a pipe dream than descheduling altogether for marijuana in America is that the United Nations is not budging anytime soon on marijuana is not medicine. And that's just one part of the United Nations. That's just this thing, the United Nations Drug Control Convention. Now, the United Nations has also come out making statements in favor of medical marijuana and even regular recreational marijuana, or at least the sentencing and the harsh punishment that comes along with some of the drug laws, and specifically in America, is who they were criticizing on that point. So the United Nations hasn't been totally quiet about marijuana as things have been unfolding the way they have been over the last 15 years. But what they have done is they've made a statement recently, and let's check back in on what they're saying. So here we have Tom Angel. He's, in case you don't know about it, he put together this awesome website called Marijuana Moment, and it's basically your one-stop shop for all the articles that he writes. And if you follow him on Twitter, he'll keep you right to the, keep your nose to the same grindstone he's on. So thanks, Tom, as usual, for keeping up with pretty much everything going on in the marijuana world. All right, so what is the United Nations saying now? Don't legalize marijuana. The UN Drug Enforcement Board warns countries. A United Nations drug enforcement body is warning international leaders to keep marijuana illegal. Countries are supposed to prohibit non-medical use of cannabis under international drug control treaties that most nations signed on to decades ago, but a growing number of U.S. states, as well as countries like Canada, are moving to enact legalization anyway. Governors and jurisdictions in North America have continued to pursue policies with respect to the legalization and use of cannabis for non-medical purposes in violation of the 1961 Convention as amended. The International Narcotics Control Board wrote in its annual report published last week. Specifically, the INCB said that a proposed marijuana legalization law that is moving through Canada's parliament is in contravention of the international agreements. Quote, the board notes with concern that in Canada, draft legislation intended to authorize and regulate the non-medical consumption of cannabis was introduced into the House of Commons in April of 2017, the report says. As the board has stated repeatedly, if passed into law, provisions of Bill C-45, which permits non-medical and non-scientific use of cannabis, would be incompatible with the obligations assumed by Canada under the 1961 Convention as amended. The United Nations body also criticized state cannabis legalization policies in the United States. Quote, the situation pertaining to cannabis cultivation and trafficking in North America continues to be in flux owing to the widening scope of personal non-medical use schemes in force in certain constituent states of the United States, it said. The decriminalization of cannabis has apparently led organized criminal groups to focus on manufacturing and trafficking other illegal drugs such as heroin. Whoa, slow down. So are you saying that you're against legalization of marijuana in certain states in the U.S. because that's making it so that the drug gangs are focusing more on moving heroin instead? Wow, you got to get your head together, man. You got to get your shit together, because this is really weird. This is almost as if you guys over at the UN drug enforcement people actually believe that marijuana and heroin are on the same level of dangerous. I mean, you're acting like, oh, whoa, let the cartels keep running the marijuana so they don't have to move the heroin around. I can't understand that. There's absolutely no logic in this statement from these guys. The decriminalization of cannabis has apparently led organized criminal groups to focus on manufacturing and trafficking other illegal drugs, such as heroin. You know what? That's your fault too. For the fact that the cartels even exist is your fault. These treaties' fault. The drug cartels that make illicit drugs, whether it be heroin or marijuana or meth or whatever, the only reason they're doing it is because of your treaties that everybody has to follow. Otherwise, it wouldn't be profitable enough for them to bother. So I don't know what you're talking about. Don't blame marijuana legalization on things that you don't like that are inevitable. I mean, that's one of those lowest common denominator, least path of resistance, no-brainers, all right? Anyway, the board warned Uruguay, which enacted a national marijuana legalization law in 2013, that it is in clear violation of the drug treaties. Uruguay's government provides marijuana to people, man, and through the, it's through the pharmacies, but still. The limitation of the use of controlled substances to medicinal and scientific purposes is a fundamental principle to which no derogation is permitted under the 1961 Convention as amended, INCB wrote in a new report. Well, you know what I recommend for the INCB to do is get off your ass, go to Israel, they're a member state, right? I think. Go over there and talk to them about the research they've already done. And if they're, I don't know, I'm not going to look it up if Israel's actually a member state. I'm pretty sure they are. If they're not, you can also go to other places around the world, do a little research, figure out that marijuana is not dangerous enough to be in your stupid drug thing. What more do we need to know, man? You guys are behind on the times? Look at the date on your fucking convention, man. 1961. Let's see, that's more than 50 years ago. Perhaps we've learned something between then and now. I mean, obviously we should have already knew it because marijuana's been around, used as medicine and recreation for 5,000 plus years, and used for other things for 10,000 years. This probably was used for getting high in medicine then too. So let's just say 10,000 years of human existence that we know and history that's written. Weed's been a part of it the whole time until now, until you guys came along worldwide and made it a thing like you're trying to do. So it's just ridiculous, man. I would say to you, fuck off, The body also raised concerns about pending proposals in the Netherlands that would legalize and regulate marijuana cultivation, saying that would be inconsistent with treaties which this country is a party. Jamaica gets called out too for its 2015 law allowing marijuana for religious use. Quote, the board reminds the government of Jamaica and all other parties that are under Article 4, Paragraph C of the 61 Convention as amended, only the medical and scientific use of cannabis is authorized, and that the use for any other purposes, including religious, is not permitted, the report says. So what are you going to do? Come and kick down the fucking door of the weed church? Give me a break. With your UN peacekeeper little berets on? And your like M16s or whatever the fuck you guys carry this week. While the INCB notes throughout the report that medical cannabis is allowed under international conventions, countries are expected to enact strict controls to ensure that cannabis is prescribed by competent medical practitioners according to sound medical practice and based on sound scientific evidence. And personal cultivation of medical marijuana by patients is not permitted, the board argues. Those articles require state providing for the use of cannabis for medical purposes to establish a national cannabis agency to control, supervise, and license its cultivation. Such agencies must designate the areas in which the cultivation of cannabis is permitted, ensure the licensing of procedures, purchase and take physical possession of stocks, and maintain a monopoly on wholesale trading and maintaining stocks. The report reads, states must take measures to prohibit the unauthorized cultivation of cannabis plants, to seize and destroy illicit crops, and to prevent the misuse of and trafficking in cannabis. Similarly, the board wishes to draw the attention of all governments to its previously stated position that personal cultivation of cannabis for medical purposes is inconsistent with the 1961 Convention as amended because it heightens the risk of diversion. Well, isn't that tough shit? How about we make it so there is no monopoly on the production of marijuana and that it can all be produced by small producers and personal home growers, and you, with your Gestapo-style language, can basically fuck off. While the INCB ostensibly has enforced authority over the provisions of the international drug control treaties, its actions usually don't amount to more than an issuing of sternly worded reports. So it is unlikely that this year's version will do more to stop the international movement towards marijuana legalization than similar past missives have. And what he's saying there, to kind of review this last statement, is that this group in the, this UN Drug Enforcement Board is just a bunch of hardline, prohibitionists, whether they're in that position politically because of religious purposes, which in a lot of cases are, or they're bloviating because they are heavily controlled by international cartels such as banksters. You notice that the international banking cartel wasn't too happy with Uruguay when they started to crack down on pharmacies and banks that did business with the pharmacies that were participating in the marijuana program. So we know that. We know that came from the top down. And, the UN is run by the same kind of society. I don't want to call them secret societies because they're not secret. They're right out in the open. There's steering groups that kind of guide policy, and, this is kind of how they guide policy, is they heavy-handedly yell at you like you're a little kid. No, stop doing that shit, guys. Come on. And they hope that just by doing that, the member states will go ahead and enforce the stupid treaty that we should have fucking been long said fuck off to. I mean, and by the way, we weren't even following the treaty to the letter if they were allowing medical marijuana since 1961, as well as using marijuana for scientific purposes. So are you kidding? Why would you follow a treaty if you don't follow it to the letter? Oh, you're selectively following the treaty. I know how it works. So anyway, that's where we are with these treaties, and that's how come we have this international drug war bullshit. And the people that are propping this drug war up are the people that want to keep marijuana illegal. Point blank. That's it. Do you think it's the people that want heroin off the streets that are so worried about whether or not we follow this treaty? No, because they don't have to worry about heroin. The United Nations don't have to crack their whip on people and be like, hey, make sure you keep heroin illegal and all that good shit. I mean, apply this to LSD. Do you think they're out there cracking whips, beating people down, saying, yo, you guys got to follow the fucking treaty or you're doing bad things? They don't have to say that about LSD. They don't have to say that about psilocybin or whatever. I don't know the full list of shit that's on Schedule 1 because I don't really care. This is bullshit list. When you have heroin and marijuana on there and you're saying that they're equally as bad and there's no good in either of them that you can put down on a piece of paper and be like, hey, this is medicine, then I already know you're full of shit. And then once I know you're full of shit, then how full of shit are you? And what's your motive? Why are you motivated to fucking lie to me? Well, we can see the reason that they're motivated to lie to us is because they're being this 1961 treaty is being propped up by the same people that want marijuana illegal. The banksters, the big pharma, the big tobacco. And it's not big tobacco like Philip Morris isn't sitting in his mansion right now. If he's even alive, he's probably been long dead, or even whatever relative of his that still runs the shit. They're not sitting in their living room fucking worried about whether marijuana is legal or not. I mean, maybe the guy that runs Coors Beer is. They were a little bit nervous. But the thing is hey, if marijuana is illegal, then hey, we can go ahead and fucking continue to sell cigarettes. They don't care. That's not how their line of thinking is. But the people that own that, they're little boards. It's a boardroom. And the people that want marijuana to stay illegal are the same players that has always been, all the way back to the same people that made it illegal in the first place. All right. I'm going to quit babbling. Sorry I went so long on that. I'm out.